To financial freedom at 35, Andrew announced, raising his glass. The conference room erupted in polite applause while I stood there, my smile plastered on like cheap wallpaper about to peel. The champagne tasted bitter, nothing like the expensive label promised. Someone had even brought in a small cake with happy retirement written in blue icing. Never thought I'd see someone escape the rat race this young, said Penny from accounting, eyeing me with thinly veiled suspicion. What's your secret? Smart investments, I replied, the lie burning my throat worse than the champagne. 3 days earlier, Andrew had called me into his office. The blinds were drawn. He pushed a folder across his desk. Performance reviews from the last 6 months. Client complaints. Documentation of advice contrary to company policy. I flipped through pages I'd never seen before. Signatures I supposedly made on dates I'd been out of town. Client meetings that never happened. This is all fabricated, I said. Andrew leaned forward. Nobody will believe that. You have 2 options, Madeline. Resign with a glowing recommendation letter citing your desire for early retirement, or we release this file to the regulatory board. Your choice. 8 years at Greenwood Financial. My clients trusted me. I'd built my reputation brick by brick while others cut corners. And now, because I'd asked too many questions about those special investment opportunities, I was being erased. Now I stood in a room full of colleagues who either believed I'd somehow struck it rich or suspected something was terribly wrong but were too afraid to ask. Andrew's arm draped across my shoulders as he posed for photos. His watch, new, I noticed, probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Speech, someone called out. I stepped forward, gripping my plastic champagne flute. Faces turned toward me, some curious, some bored, some anxious to get back to their desks. I'd like to thank everyone for the wonderful years at Greenwood, I began, my voice steadier than I expected, especially Andrew, for his mentorship. Andrew's smile twitched at the corner. I've learned so much about how this business truly works, I continued. Lessons I'll carry with me forever. Andrew stepped forward. Well, we don't want to keep everyone from their work too long. One last thing, I interrupted. Success isn't always what it seems. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away. I raised my glass. To knowing exactly what you're invested in. The room went quiet. For 3 heartbeats, Andrew's eyes locked with mine. A flash of uncertainty crossing his face. Then he laughed, breaking the tension. Always the philosopher. That's our Madeline. As people returned to their desks, he gripped my elbow. Clean out your office by 5. Security will escort you out. I walked to my relegated workspace, the converted supply closet they'd moved me to last month, feeling dozens of eyes on my back. Inside, I closed the door and allowed myself 30 seconds of pure, silent rage. Then I pulled out my phone and sent a 1-word text. Done. Wait, before I continue this story, if you're enjoying it so far, tap the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. I read all the comments, so let me know if you've ever witnessed workplace injustice yourself. My name is Madeline Pierce, and until 3 days ago, I was a senior investment advisor at one of the most respected financial firms in the city. I built my client base carefully, mostly teachers, nurses, and small business owners who trusted me with their futures. People like my parents, who lost everything in the 2008 crash because someone like Andrew told them they were safely diversified. I'm 35, single not by choice but by dedication to my career, and until recently, I believed that playing by the rules would protect me. I was wrong. It started 6 months ago with the new investment packages Andrew brought from the regional meeting. Exclusive opportunities with guaranteed returns that seemed too good to be true. These will put us ahead of quarterly targets, he announced in the team meeting. Everyone needs to transition at least 15 clients into these vehicles by month end. When I asked to see the prospectuses, Andrew handed me sanitized summary sheets. Where are the full disclosure documents? I asked. Don't worry about those, he said, winking. The legal team has vetted everything. That night, I stayed late, using my system's access to dig deeper. What I found made my stomach clench. The investments were primarily in shell operations with virtually no assets. The projected returns were based on nothing but fantasy math. Worse, the risk profiles shown to clients rated these as conservative options, perfect for retirees. I drafted an email to our compliance department but hesitated before sending it. 2 years ago, Rita from the Phoenix office had raised similar concerns. She was terminated for performance issues a month later. Nobody had heard from her since. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with Andrew. I can't recommend these to my clients, I told him. The risk factors alone. Everyone else is on board, he cut in. Don't make this difficult, Madeline. But if these investments fail, they won't fail on paper, he said quietly. That's all that matters. That's when I should have walked away. Instead, I nodded and said I needed time to review the materials more carefully. He seemed satisfied, but the next day, my office was reassigned to the supply closet, temporary renovations that never ended. I began noticing other changes. My premium clients were reassigned for workload balancing. My meeting requests with certain clients were mysteriously canceled. The newer advisors stopped making eye contact in the break room. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. Late one evening, I accessed the system using Penny's login. She always used her cat's name and birthday for everything, and discovered documents with my signature authorizing transfers of client funds into those questionable investments, clients I hadn't spoken to in months. My signature, perfectly forged, dates that created a paper trail going back months. They weren't just pushing me out, they were setting me up to take the fall when everything collapsed. That night, I called an old friend from college, Nina, now an investigative reporter specializing in financial crimes. We met at a diner, 2 towns over. They're building a paper trail to frame you, she said after I explained everything. Classic scapegoating. I need to fight this, I insisted. Nina shook her head. Not directly. They've already prepared for that. She wrote a name and number on a napkin. Call this person tomorrow. Follow their instructions exactly. And Madeline? Delete this contact immediately after. The next morning, I called the number. The woman who answered didn't identify herself, asked pointed questions about the types of records I had access to, and gave me precise instructions. Nothing illegal, just specific information to gather, when to gather it, and where to store it. Most importantly, she said before hanging up, announce your retirement. Make it believable. Act defeated. Let them think they've won. So I did. I walked into Andrew's office and told him I was taking the retirement option. The relief on his face was immediate. Smart choice, he said. We'll announce it tomorrow. For the next 2 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I smiled through the humiliating retirement party. I thanked Andrew for his mentorship. I handed over my client files and pretended not to notice as my replacement, Tessa, was instructed to review my work for inconsistencies. The day after I left, I received a text from an unknown number. Package delivered. Maintain position. 3 days later, Andrew called. His voice sounded strained. Madeline, we should grab lunch. I have some opportunities we might discuss. At the restaurant, he kept glancing toward the door. You haven't been in contact with any clients, have you? He asked. No, I lied. Clean break, like we agreed. Good. He fidgeted with his water glass. The thing is, we've been thinking. Your expertise is valuable. We might bring you back as a consultant. Translation. They needed to control me. I'm actually enjoying retirement, I said, though I've been getting some strange calls. His knuckles whitened around his glass. What kind of calls? Oh, probably nothing. Some clients asking why they can't withdraw their funds despite the great returns they're seeing on paper. I directed them back to the office, of course. Andrew's face paled. That's good. Very professional of you. When he excused himself to the restroom, I glimpsed him making a frantic phone call in the hallway. That evening, Tessa appeared at my door, looking nervously over her shoulder. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "The numbers don't add up, Madeline." The performance statements show impossible returns, but when I try to verify the actual investments, she glanced back at her car, where her young daughter was watching videos on a tablet. I've got student loans, a mortgage. I can't afford to lose this job, but something is very wrong. I invited her in, made tea, and gave her the only advice I could. Document everything, but tell no one. Keep your head down. 2 days later, she texted me, got promoted to client relations, higher salary, less access to investment data. They were isolating her from the evidence. That night, I received another text from the unknown number, 72 hours. Be prepared. For what? I wondered. But something told me I'd know soon enough. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing incessantly. Text messages, missed calls, news alerts, all converging on a single event. I clicked on the first news link. Breaking. Federal agents raid Greenwood Financial on fraud allegations. Live footage showed FBI agents carrying boxes of documents from the building where I'd spent the last 8 years of my life. Reporters clustered around the entrance. I caught a glimpse of Andrew being escorted to a car, his suit jacket pulled over his head. My phone lit up with a call from Penny. "Madeline, are you watching this? The whole place is crawling with agents." "What happened?" I asked, feigning shock. "They're saying it's some massive fraud scheme, false investment returns, misappropriated client funds. Andrew and the executive team were just arrested." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Everyone's talking about your retirement. The timing. People are connecting dots." My other line beeped. "Nina, I'll call you back," I told Penny, switching over. "Turn on Channel 8, Nina said without preamble. "You're about to become very popular." I flipped on the television to see a grim-faced federal prosecutor at a press conference. "The investigation began 6 months ago following information provided by a whistleblower," she was saying. "We've uncovered evidence of systematic fraud totaling approximately $94 million, affecting over 300 investors, many of them elderly." My doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in dark suits. "Federal agents," one called out. "Miss Pierce, we need to speak with you." For one terrifying moment, I wondered if I'd miscalculated everything. Had Andrew somehow implicated me? Was I being set up as he intended? I opened the door, hands trembling. "Madeline Pierce? I'm Agent Harlow. This is Agent Torres. We'd like to ask you some questions about Greenwood Financial." They weren't here to arrest me, they needed my testimony. For the next 4 hours, I answered their questions, describing the suspicious investment packages, the forged signatures, my abrupt retirement. "We have reason to believe they were positioning you as the fall person," Agent Torres said. "Documents found this morning suggest they were building a paper trail to implicate you as the mastermind." "That explains the sudden retirement celebration," I said. Agent Harlow nodded. "They needed you gone but accessible. If the scheme collapsed, they'd claim you orchestrated everything, then disappeared with your retirement as cover." "Will I need to testify?" I asked. "Eventually. For now, we ask that you don't leave town or discuss the case details." After they left, I collapsed onto my couch, emotionally drained. My phone continued buzzing with messages from colleagues, and some expressing shock, others asking if I'd known what was happening, a few apologizing for believing rumors about my departure. That evening, a knock at my door revealed Tessa, eyes red from crying. "They questioned me for hours," she said as I ushered her in. "They think I was involved because of the promotion. I could lose my license, my home, everything." "Did you tell them I warned you?" I asked. She nodded. "They already knew. They had records of our meeting, surveillance photos of my car outside your house." "How did they—" She stopped, studying my face. "You knew this was coming." I chose my words carefully. "I suspected something wasn't right. That's all. The FBI agent said you were lucky to get out when you did." Her eyes narrowed. "But it wasn't luck, was it?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. An unknown number. "I should take this," I said. Tessa gathered her purse. "I understand. Thank you for the tea." At the door, she paused. "Whatever you did, I hope it was worth it." The call was from the same woman who'd given me instructions weeks earlier. "You'll be contacted tomorrow about providing formal testimony," she said. "Until then, say nothing to anyone." "What about my clients? Their investments? Assets are being frozen pending investigation. That's all I can say." The next morning, my doorbell rang at 7:15. I opened it to find my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Winslow, clutching a newspaper. "You worked at this place?" she asked, pointing to the Greenwood Financial headline. My heart sank. Mrs. Winslow had mentioned investing her late husband's life insurance with a nice young man last year. "Are you a client there?" I asked gently. Tears welled in her eyes. "They said I'd have enough for my granddaughter's college next year. Now the news says it might all be gone." I invited her in, made tea, and helped her call the victim assistance line the FBI had established. As I listened to her explain her situation to the operator, rage bubbled inside me. Mrs. Winslow wasn't wealthy, just a widow who trusted professionals to safeguard her future. That afternoon, Agent Torres returned with a formal request for my testimony. As we reviewed my statement, he revealed something that made my blood run cold. "We found this in Andrew's personal safe," he said, sliding a document across the table. It was a draft press release, dated 3 weeks in the future, announcing the tragic suicide of former advisor Madeline Pierce following allegations of massive client fraud. The document included facts about my supposed confession note, details of funds allegedly hidden in overseas accounts, and quotes from devastated colleagues. "They were planning to kill me?" I whispered. "We believe they intended to make it appear that way. Your signature has been forged on accounts in the Cayman Islands. The plan appears to have been to frame you, then eliminate the possibility of you defending yourself. I stared at the document, my hands shaking. The calculated ruthlessness was staggering. Who gave you the information that started this investigation? I asked. Agent Torres shook his head. That remains confidential, but I can tell you that whoever it was saved not just millions of dollars, but potentially your life. After he left, I sat alone in my apartment, replaying every interaction, every warning sign I'd missed. The walls seemed to close in. These people had planned my character assassination and potentially my actual death, all while smiling and toasting my retirement. I needed air. Grabbing my keys, I headed to the walking trail by the river. The evening was mild, the path nearly empty. I'd gone about a mile when a jogger approached from behind. "Beautiful evening," a familiar voice said. Nina fell into step beside me. We walked in silence until we reached a bench overlooking the water. "The FBI found a draft press release about my suicide," I said quietly. Nina nodded. "They're more thorough than I expected. Were you the whistleblower?" She laughed softly. "No, Madeline, you were." I turned to look at her. I never spoke to the authorities. Not directly. Remember our hypothetical conversation? The unnamed source I discussed investment fraud with? The records you gathered following very specific instructions? She shrugged. Journalists protect their sources. Financial crime investigators follow evidence. Understanding dawned slowly. You engineered all of this. I connected dots. You provided the dots. She checked her watch. The formal charges will be announced tomorrow. 37 counts of wire fraud, securities fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. Andrew faces up to 30 years. What happens now? Now, you rebuild. The receiver will attempt to recover assets for the victims. Your testimony will help ensure convictions. She stood. Don't contact me again until after the trial. And Madeline, sleep with your security system armed. The next morning, I checked my email to find an interview request from every major news outlet. My phone showed 17 voicemails from former clients. A letter had arrived from the regulatory board requesting my cooperation with their investigation. The world wanted answers I wasn't ready to provide. I was making coffee when my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Hello? Madeline." Andrew's voice sent ice through my veins. "We need to talk." "How are you calling me? Aren't you in custody?" "Made bail an hour ago. Listen carefully. There's been a misunderstanding." "Really? Was the press release about my suicide also a misunderstanding?" Silence. Then, "What press release?" "The FBI found it in your safe, Andrew. Along with evidence you were framing me for everything." His voice hardened. "You have no idea what you've done. This goes beyond me, beyond Greenwood. Powerful people are involved." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm warning you. Testimony can be discredited. Witnesses can be compromised. Think about that before you talk to prosecutors again." The line went dead. I stood frozen, the coffee pot overflowing onto the counter. My hands shook as I dialed Agent Torres. "Andrew just called me," I said when he answered. "He made threats. That's a violation of his bail conditions." "Where are you now?" "At home." "Stay there. Lock your doors. We're sending someone." 20 minutes later, 2 agents arrived to take my statement. As they were preparing to leave, one of them paused. "Miss Pierce, would you like protective custody until the hearing?" The question made the situation terrifyingly real. These weren't empty threats. The FBI believed Andrew and his associates were dangerous enough to warrant protection. "For how long?" I asked. "The arraignment is in 3 days. After that, we can reassess. 3 days in protective custody, or risk whatever powerful people," Andrew had mentioned. I thought about Mrs. Winslow, about all the clients who trusted Greenwood with their futures. "I'll pack a bag," I said. The safe house was a modest apartment in a secure building. No windows, reinforced door, emergency alert system. I was instructed not to contact anyone or use social media. 2 agents remained posted outside. On the second night, I was awakened by Agent Torres calling. "We're moving you," he said tersely. "Be ready in 5 minutes." "What's happened?" "Someone accessed the safe house location information. Pack only essentials." Heart pounding, I threw clothes into my bag and waited by the door. When it opened, Agent Torres and 3 other agents rushed in. "Stay between us," he instructed, leading me to the stairwell rather than the elevator. In the garage, they loaded me into an unmarked SUV with tinted windows. As we pulled out, I noticed a black sedan parked across the street, its engine running. "Is that—" "Don't look," Agent Torres said sharply. "Head down." As our vehicle accelerated, the sedan pulled out behind us. "We've got a tail," the driver announced. Torres spoke into his radio, requesting backup. "Change of plans. Take Route B." The SUV swerved suddenly, cutting through an alley. The sedan followed. Our driver executed a series of sharp turns, trying to lose our pursuer. "Who are they?" I asked, panic rising. "We don't know yet. Could be private security. Could be someone with interest in keeping you quiet." The sedan was gaining on us when police cruisers appeared, lights flashing. Our tail abruptly turned down a side street and disappeared. "That was too close," Torres muttered as we pulled into an underground garage at what appeared to be a hotel. "New plan. You're going into witness protection until the arraignment." The word hit me like a physical blow. Witness protection? But my life, my home, will still be there in 3 days. Right now, staying alive is the priority. As they escorted me through the service entrance, I realized how thoroughly my world had unraveled. A week ago, I'd been an investment advisor forced into early retirement. Now I was in protective custody, running from unknown threats, about to testify against the man who'd tried to destroy me. But deep down, beneath the fear and uncertainty, something else was growing: determination. Andrew and his associates had taken enough from me and countless others. They wouldn't take anything more. The next morning, I woke in a sparse hotel room, disoriented until I remembered this was witness protection. My phone, credit cards, even my watch had been confiscated to prevent tracking. I was now Ellen Thompson, a business consultant visiting for a conference. A knock at the door revealed Agent Torres with breakfast and news. "Andrew violated bail conditions by contacting you. The judge revoked his bail an hour ago." Relief washed over me. "So he's back in custody?" Torres hesitated. "That's the problem. When officers arrived at his home, he was gone." My momentary relief evaporated. "Gone? How?" "Gone. Gone." My momentary relief evaporated. "Disabled his ankle monitor somehow. We've got teams searching, but Andrew was smart, connected, and desperate. A dangerous combination." "What about the arraignment?" "Postponed until he's found. You'll remain in protective custody." Days stretched into a week. I paced my hotel room, watched mindless television, and wondered if this limbo would ever end. Agent Torres brought updates. Andrew's accounts had been frozen, international alerts issued, associates questioned. On day 9, Torres arrived with a woman I hadn't met before. "This is Asa Kennedy from the prosecutor's office," he said. Kennedy was sharp-eyed, with the focused intensity of someone who never lost. "We believe Andrew has fled the country, likely to a non-extradition territory. His passport wasn't used, but we found evidence of a private charter to Panama." "What does that mean for the case?" I asked. "We proceed against the other defendants. His flight strengthens our position. Juries interpret running as admission of guilt. But we need you to testify at the preliminary hearing tomorrow." "With Andrew still out there? After what happened at the safe house?" Kennedy's expression softened slightly. "We've arranged significant security. This testimony is crucial. Without it, some charges against the remaining defendants might not stick." That night, I barely slept. If Andrew had indeed fled to a non-extradition country, he could rebuild his life while his victims struggled to recover anything. The thought made my blood boil. Morning came with increased security. 4 agents escorted me to an armored SUV. The courthouse had been swept, access restricted. I was led through a private entrance to a waiting room. Kennedy met me there, reviewing key points of my testimony. "Remember, stick to facts, no speculation." "What if they ask about Nina, about how the investigation started?" "The judge already ruled that the identity of journalistic sources is protected. Answer truthfully, but without specifics." The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with rows of familiar faces, colleagues from Greenwood, some looking ashamed, others defiant. Tessa sat near the back, giving me a small nod of encouragement. For 3 hours, I testified about the fraudulent investment packages, the forged signatures, the threats, and intimidation. Defense attorneys tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee, a failed advisor seeking revenge. "Isn't it true you were underperforming before your so-called retirement?" one lawyer asked. "No. My client portfolio outperformed the firm average by 12% in the previous year. Yet, you were relocated to a smaller office. Performance issues seem the logical explanation. I was relocated after questioning the legitimacy of certain investment vehicles, the same ones now under federal investigation. Back and forth it went, each attorney trying to undermine my credibility. Through it all, I remained calm, factual, focused. When we broke for lunch, Kennedy looked pleased. "You're doing great. The judge is taking notes during your key points. That's a good sign." As we prepared to return, Agent Torres rushed in. "We need to move. Now." "What's happened?" Kennedy demanded. "Andrew's been spotted near the courthouse. SWAT team is moving in, but we're evacuating, miss." Pierce immediately. They rushed me through back corridors, out to a waiting vehicle. As we pulled away, I glimpsed tactical teams converging on the courthouse steps. "Was it really him?" I asked. Torres shook his head. "Unconfirmed. Could be mistaken identity. Could be intentional distraction." We drove to a different hotel, checked in under yet another alias. Hours passed with no updates. Eventually, Torres returned. "False alarm. Security footage shows it wasn't Andrew. But we're not taking chances. You'll remain here until the hearing concludes." 2 more days of testimony followed, each with elaborate security measures. Defense attorneys grew increasingly hostile as their attempts to discredit me failed. The evidence was simply too overwhelming. On the final day, as I stepped down from the witness stand, one defendant, Greenwood's chief financial officer, leaned toward his lawyer and whispered something that made them both turn pale. That evening, Torres arrived with news. The CFO is cooperating, offering testimony against everyone, including Andrew. Does he know where Andrew is? Not exactly, but he's provided account numbers, contacts, probable locations. Torres smiled slightly. The net is tightening. 3 weeks later, I was finally allowed to return home. The preliminary hearing had resulted in indictments against 12 Greenwood executives. Asset recovery efforts were underway for victims. My testimony had been deemed instrumental by the prosecution team. Still, Andrew remained at large, a shadow hanging over everything. I installed a new security system, changed my routines, looked over my shoulder constantly. Then came the call from Nina. "Turn on the news, now." The television showed footage of a yacht being boarded by authorities in the Mediterranean. The headline, "Fugitive Financial Executive Apprehended." "They found him," I whispered. "Better than that," Nina replied. "Read the ticker at the bottom." I focused on the scrolling text. "Arrest follows anonymous tip providing exact coordinates." Understanding dawned slowly. The tip wasn't anonymous to you, was it? Let's just say a certain financial officer made a deal that included revealing Andrew's escape plan. The rest was simple journalistic legwork. 2 days later, Agent Torres visited with an evidence bag. "Found in Andrew's possession," he said, handing me a sealed envelope. "It's been processed for the case, but the prosecutor thought you should see it." Inside was a list of names, mine at the top, with detailed notes about accidents to be arranged once certain offshore payments cleared. "He was planning this from the beginning," I said, my voice hollow. "Yes, but now he's facing additional charges of bail jumping, conspiracy to commit murder, and international financial crimes. He'll never breathe free air again." 6 months passed. Life settled into a new normal. I started consulting for fraud prevention programs, sharing my experience with regulatory agencies. The criminal trial date approached, with Andrew now held without bail. One morning, my doorbell rang. A courier delivered a thick envelope, case documents requiring my review before trial. Among them was a psychiatric evaluation of Andrew, conducted after his capture. I read it twice, pieces finally clicking into place. Andrew's pathological need for control, his belief in his own invulnerability, his absolute certainty that money could solve any problem. These weren't just character flaws. They were his fundamental weaknesses. That afternoon, I visited Nina at her office. "I've been thinking about Andrew's capture," I said. "The timing seems convenient." Nina raised an eyebrow. "How so?" "The CFO flips, provides information about Andrew's escape plan, and suddenly authorities know exactly where to find him after weeks of searching. Sometimes cases break that way, or sometimes someone ensures they break that way." I leaned forward. The CFO didn't just happen to flip. Someone approached him with evidence he couldn't ignore, evidence that would implicate him beyond what was already known. Nina's expression remained neutral. "Interesting theory. Not a theory." While organizing my records for the trial, I found something odd. Remember those backup files I made before leaving Greenwood? They contain emails the CFO thought were deleted, communications with Andrew about my retirement and the plan to frame me. "And you shared these with investigators?" "Not all of them. Just enough to secure indictments. I held back the communications about the CFO's offshore accounts, the ones not yet discovered by investigators. Understanding dawned in Nina's eyes. So, when the moment was right, I made sure he received copies, along with a suggestion that cooperation might be his only option, particularly regarding Andrew's whereabouts. That's resourceful. I learned from the best. I stood to leave. The thing is, Andrew never understood the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge would have been watching him run forever, looking over his shoulder, never knowing when his world would collapse. Justice is making sure he faces every victim in court, sees every life he damaged, answers for every lie he told. And which did you choose? I smiled for the first time in months, a real smile that felt strange on my face. I chose something better. I used his playbook against him. He tried to make me the scapegoat, but instead, I became the catalyst for his complete destruction. He never saw it coming, because people like Andrew never believe the rules apply to them. That's why they fall so hard. At the trial 2 weeks later, I watched Andrew enter the courtroom in handcuffs, no longer the confident executive who had threatened me. His eyes, once sharp with calculation, now darted nervously around the room, landing briefly on me before quickly looking away. As I took the stand to testify, I realized the true revenge wasn't in his capture or even his inevitable conviction. It was in this moment, Andrew watching helplessly as I dismantled the narrative he'd tried to create about me, as I reclaimed my story piece by piece, as every word I spoke drove another nail into the coffin of his freedom. When asked why I had initially accepted the retirement option instead of fighting immediately, I looked directly at Andrew and said, "Sometimes victory isn't about confrontation. It's about patience, about recognizing when someone is digging their own grave and simply making sure they have enough rope to finish the job." Andrew's face went ashen as his own strategy became clear to him. He had given me everything I needed to destroy him while believing he was orchestrating my downfall. The ultimate irony, his attempt to silence me, had given me the loudest voice in the room. That night, as the jury began deliberations, I sat alone on my balcony, watching the sunset. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt truly free. Not because Andrew would spend decades in prison, but because I had reclaimed my power in the most fitting way possible, by using truth as my weapon. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or threatened by someone who thought they held all the power, remember this: patience isn't weakness, and silence isn't surrender. Sometimes the most powerful response is to step back, observe the bigger picture, and let your adversaries believe they've won, until the moment they realize they've orchestrated their own defeat. Like this story? Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever watched someone's carefully constructed lies eventually collapse around them? I'd love to hear your experiences. "Make these losses look like gains," he ordered, pointing at the quarterly report. I felt my throat tighten as Barrett's words hung between us. The financial statements spread across my desk told the real story. Our flagship product had failed 3 safety tests in a row, costing millions in redesign expenses. Now, our new CFO wanted me to hide it, but the numbers show clear development setbacks, I managed. The investors will eventually— "Not your concern, Audrey." Barrett adjusted his gold cufflinks. "Either turn this 8% loss into a 4% gain before tomorrow's presentation, or we'll find someone with the creativity to do so." 6 years I'd built my reputation at this company. 6 years of accurate projections and honest financial assessments, even when the truth hurt. Now this man, barely 3 months with us, was threatening my career unless I committed fraud. "You're asking me to falsify financial statements to federal investors," I said quietly. "I'm asking you to present our situation optimistically." His smile never wavered. "Creative accounting happens everywhere. Did you think you worked for saints?" When I didn't immediately respond, he leaned forward. "Remember that promotion you've been chasing? The senior financial analyst position? Help me with this small adjustment, and I'll make sure the executive team recognizes your team spirit. And if I refuse, then I'll have to question whether you're the right fit for our forward-thinking culture." He tapped the report. "Decision by morning. I need time to rehearse with the adjusted figures." After Barrett left, I sat motionless. The red ink on those reports represented real problems that needed addressing. Hiding them would only postpone the inevitable collapse and potentially make it worse. That night, I barely slept. By dawn, I'd made my decision. I'll prepare the adjusted reports, I told Barrett the next morning, my voice hollow. The triumph in his eyes made my stomach turn as I returned to my workspace. What Barrett didn't know was why I'd been recruited straight from graduate school. My thesis on algorithmic pattern detection in financial misrepresentation had caught attention. I understood numerical manipulation better than anyone in the building. I created the most intricate financial presentation of my career. Surface level, it showed exactly what Barrett demanded. Our significant losses transformed into modest gains. But hidden within the calculations was something else entirely. When I handed him the presentation file, he barely glanced at it before the investor meeting. "This better reflect what I asked for," he warned. "It reflects exactly what needs to be seen," I answered truthfully. The investor presentation proceeded perfectly according to Barrett's plan. The attendees nodded appreciatively at the surprising turnaround in our finances. No one questioned a single figure. Until 3 days later, when everything changed. Wow, you've made it this far into my story. Thank you for listening. If you're finding this interesting, please hit that like button to help others discover it too. And if you want more stories about corporate intrigue and integrity, consider subscribing to this channel. I post new content every week. Now, let me continue. My name is Audrey Winters, and until 3 months before this incident, I'd been living my dream job. Growing up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, I'd developed an almost religious devotion to financial stability. Numbers made sense when little else did. They told honest stories when people often didn't. I graduated top of my class with a double major in financial analysis and data science. My thesis on pattern recognition in financial fraud caught the attention of several companies, but I chose the one that promised the most ethical approach to business. For 6 years, I walked the narrow path of integrity. Even when other analysts massaged numbers to look better for quarterly reviews, I refused. My reports were precise, honest, and respected, until Barrett Kingsley arrived as our new CFO. Barrett came with impressive credentials. Previous companies had experienced miraculous turnarounds under his financial leadership. The board brought him in when our stocks started slipping after 3 quarters of disappointing returns. From day one, he made it clear that my approach was unnecessarily conservative. In meetings, he'd suggest alternative interpretations of my analyses. I pushed back professionally, backing my positions with data. The tension between us was palpable, but I held my ground. Until that day with the quarterly report. What I haven't told you yet is what I actually did with that presentation. Yes, I adjusted the numbers, as Barrett demanded. On the surface, losses became gains. But within the digital architecture of that presentation, I embedded a complex algorithm I developed during my graduate studies. For every manipulated figure, the algorithm created an invisible watermark, undetectable during a standard presentation, but immediately apparent when processed through specific analytical tools. I included these tools in an appendix labeled Advanced Metric Analysis that looked like standard supplementary information. I also added something else, a small footnote on slide 43 that referenced alternative calculation methodologies available upon request, with my direct contact information. I knew Barrett wouldn't notice. He barely reviewed presentations before delivering them, trusting his ability to improvise and charm. He skimmed the slides once, nodded in satisfaction at the positive numbers, and proceeded with confidence to the investor meeting. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a mathematical proof. 3 days after the presentation, I received an email from Helena Brandt, one of our major investors, who specialized in tech analytics. She requested a meeting to discuss my alternative calculation methodologies. Barrett wasn't copied on the email. When I arrived at the coffee shop Helena suggested, I found not just her, but 2 other investors and a woman I didn't recognize. "Audrey," Helena began after introductions, "I ran your presentation through our proprietary analysis tools. Something interesting emerged." She turned her laptop toward me, showing the hidden patterns I'd embedded. "These appear to be intentional markers of data manipulation." "Care to explain?" My heart hammered in my chest. This was the moment I'd both feared and anticipated. Those markers identify where the original data was altered to present a more favorable outlook than reality supports. "And you included these markers deliberately?" asked Ramesh, another investor. "Yes. Why not simply refuse to alter the data?" the unknown woman asked. She hadn't given her name during introductions, but her attire screamed Federal Regulatory Agency. Because I needed evidence of the pattern, I replied. This isn't the first time similar adjustments have been made in presentations delivered by our CFO, but it's the first time I could prove it systematically. Helena nodded slowly. I ran the algorithm against financial presentations from Barrett Kingsley's previous 3 companies. The pattern signatures are remarkably similar, though less sophisticated than yours. The unnamed woman finally introduced herself. I'm Lydia Moore, Securities and Exchange Commission. We've been tracking unusual financial patterns across several companies for 18 months. Your algorithm just connected several dots for us. What happens now? I asked, my future suddenly uncertain. Lydia closed her notebook. That depends on whether you're willing to show us exactly how deep this goes. My stomach tightened as I considered Lydia's question. Cooperating with the SEC meant potentially destroying not just Barrett's career, but possibly harming the company I'd devoted 6 years to building. I need to know my colleagues won't suffer for one man's actions, I said firmly. Ramesh leaned forward. We're investors because we believe in your company's vision. We want it to succeed legitimately, not through manipulation. What you've uncovered may be just the surface, Helena added. If your CFO has been systematically misrepresenting financial data, there could be deeper issues. Better to address them now than after a collapse. I took a deep breath. I'll help, but I need protection. Lydia handed me her card. We can arrange whistleblower status. It includes confidentiality and legal shields. Call this number tomorrow to begin the process. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I performed my usual duties, pretending nothing had changed. Barrett seemed pleased with me, even hinting at that promotion. By night, I met with Lydia's team, providing years of financial data and teaching them how to decode subtle manipulations. What we uncovered was staggering. Barrett hadn't just misrepresented our current quarter. He'd been systematically building a house of cards throughout his career. His pattern was brilliant in its simplicity. Join struggling companies, create illusory turnarounds through accounting tricks, attract new investment, then move on before the inevitable collapse. He's hit at least 4 companies before yours, Lydia explained during one late-night meeting, each time following the same playbook. Why hasn't anyone caught him before? I asked. Because nobody had your specific expertise to identify his numerical fingerprints. His techniques evolve slightly with each company, but your algorithm detected the underlying pattern. The investigation remained confidential, but living with this knowledge, while smiling at Barrett in hallways, became increasingly difficult. Then came the breaking point. Barrett called me into his office 3 weeks after the investor presentation. Audrey, our investors were so impressed with last quarter's turnaround that they're considering a substantial new investment round. That's good news, I managed. Based on your exceptional work with those figures, I'm putting you in charge of preparing all future investor presentations. His smile seemed genuine. Consider this your promotion to senior financial analyst, effective immediately with a 30% salary increase. He was rewarding me for committing fraud. Worse, he was positioning me to become his accomplice in an ongoing scheme. Thank you for this opportunity, I said, hoping my voice wouldn't betray me. I'm looking forward to applying my unique approach to future reports. I knew you'd come around to seeing the bigger picture, Barrett said, clapping my shoulder. Sometimes we need to help others see the company's potential, even if it means creative interpretation. That night, I called Lydia. They're planning a new investment round based on fraudulent numbers. We need to move faster. We're not quite ready, she cautioned. We need concrete proof linking Barrett to direct knowledge of the manipulations. Right now, he could claim he was just presenting numbers you prepared. He specifically instructed me to falsify the data. Verbal instructions in a private meeting. Your word against his. And he has the reputation and position of power. We need something irrefutable. I thought for a moment. What if I could get him to incriminate himself, provide the evidence you need? That would accelerate our timeline significantly. I'll find a way, I promised. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Barrett to discuss methodology for upcoming projections. When we were alone in his office, I carefully placed my phone on his desk, appearing to set it aside casually while activating the recording function. I've been reviewing our approach for the new investment round, I began. I want to clarify exactly how you'd like me to adjust the current figures. Barrett leaned back in his chair. Similar to last time, we need to show consistent growth. The manufacturing delays are temporary, but investors don't need those details yet. So convert the current 9% loss into something positive again? Exactly. Show them 5% growth minimum. Use whatever methods necessary. I pretended to take notes while my phone captured everything. Just to be clear, we're again presenting figures that don't reflect our actual financial position, misrepresenting our losses as gains. He gave me an impatient look. Audrey, we've been through this. The actual numbers are just raw materials. Our job is to shape the narrative. Once new investment comes in and our production issues resolve, the real numbers will catch up to our projections. And if they don't, then we adjust again. This is how business works at this level. The small-minded focus on quarterly precision. Leaders focus on long-term vision. And sometimes that requires managing perceptions along the way. I understand completely now, I said, gathering my things, including my phone with its damning recording. I'll have the preliminary figures ready for your review tomorrow. As I stood to leave, Barrett added, this conversation stays between us, obviously. Some people still cling to outdated notions about absolute transparency. Of course, I replied. Absolute discretion. I walked out with exactly what the SEC needed. But that evening, everything took an unexpected turn. My apartment door was slightly ajar when I returned home. Inside, I found someone had searched through my possessions with surgical precision. Drawers partially open. Laptop moved slightly from its usual position. Nothing appeared missing, but the message was clear. Someone knew what I was doing. My first instinct was to call Lydia, but something stopped me. What if Barrett wasn't working alone? What if someone at the SEC was feeding him information? I needed to be careful. I slept at a hotel that night. My phone turned off. The recording backed up to an encrypted drive. In the morning, I went directly to Helena Brandt, the investor who had first discovered my embedded algorithm. Someone searched my apartment. I told her after ensuring her office wasn't bugged. I think Barrett suspects something. Helena's expression darkened. This changes things. How close is the SEC to making their move? They needed concrete evidence. I got it yesterday. A recording of Barrett explicitly instructing me to falsify financial data. Where is it now? Secure. But I don't know who to trust with it. Helena thought for a moment. I have connections beyond the SEC who can help ensure this evidence reaches the right people without being buried. Corporate fraud at this level involves networks of protection. Barrett likely has allies we haven't identified. What should I do in the meantime? Pretend everything is normal. Prepare the reports Barrett expects. But don't include any revealing algorithms this time. We need him to believe you're fully cooperating. And then, Helena's eyes hardened. Then we spring a trap he'll never see coming. I returned to work, smiling at colleagues, nodding respectfully to Barrett, all while feeling like a tightrope walker above a pit of snakes. I prepared the new financial presentation exactly as Barrett had instructed. False figures, inflated projections, the complete package of deception. But beneath this apparent compliance, Helena and I were orchestrating something much bigger than Barrett could imagine. Something that would change not just his fate, but potentially transform how financial fraud was detected throughout the industry. What Barrett never realized was that Helena Brandt wasn't just any investor. Before founding her investment firm, she'd helped develop the SEC's fraud detection systems. And she had maintained connections across financial regulatory bodies worldwide. Together, we were building something much more significant than just a case against one corrupt CFO. We were creating a framework to identify similar patterns across the entire market. As I finalized Barrett's fraudulent presentation, I received an encrypted message from Helena. Everything in place. Board meeting tomorrow will have unexpected guests. Be ready to present both versions of reality. My heart raced as I realized what she meant. After months of manipulation and weeks of gathering evidence, tomorrow would change everything. What I didn't know was that Barrett had plans for tomorrow too. Plans that would put everything, including my life, at risk. The next morning arrived with tension humming through my body. I dressed with particular care, a navy suit that projected authority rather than my usual conservative attire. Today wasn't about blending in. It was about standing my ground. When I arrived at the office, Barrett intercepted me before I could reach my desk. A word? He asked with a tight smile. His eyes held something I hadn't seen before, a calculating wariness. He guided me to a small conference room and closed the door. I received an interesting call from someone at your apartment building yesterday. Maintenance reported a concerned neighbor had called about your door being open while you were at work. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. That's concerning. I'll have to check if anything's missing. The interesting thing, Barrett continued, leaning against the wall rather than sitting, is that they contacted me rather than you, as if someone specifically wanted me to know your place had been searched. He studied me with cold precision, a clumsy intimidation tactic, wouldn't you say? I realized with a chill that Barrett had orchestrated the break-in himself. It wasn't a search, but a message, and now he was watching for my reaction, measuring my fear. I'm not sure what you're implying, I responded, meeting his gaze steadily. Let me be direct then. Your compliance recently seemed out of character, so I had someone with technical expertise examine the presentation files you prepared. My stomach dropped, but I maintained my composure. They found traces of unusual code embedded in the graphics, almost like a watermark or signature. His voice hardened. Care to explain why you'd include something like that in confidential financial documents? All my presentations include proprietary analytical frameworks, I replied smoothly. It's what made our data visualization stand out to investors. Is it also what made Helena Brandt contact you privately after the presentation? So he knew about that meeting. Had he been watching me all along? Helena had questions about our methodology. I answered them. Barrett's laugh held no humor. Audrey, you've impressed me with your skills. Truly, but you're playing a game you don't understand. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. Me entering the SEC building 2 weeks ago. Corporate survival isn't just about numbers. It's about loyalty and discretion. Are you threatening me? I asked quietly. I'm reminding you that careers are fragile things. The board meeting starts in an hour. You'll deliver the presentation we discussed, without any hidden surprises. Afterward, we'll revisit your future with this company. He stepped closer. Remember, if this company suffers, hundreds of employees suffer too. Your colleagues, your friends, all because you couldn't embrace necessary business practices. He left me sitting alone, shaking with a combination of fear and rage. He was threatening not just me, but leveraging my concern for my colleagues against me. I had 20 minutes before I needed to upload my presentation to the board meeting server. 20 minutes to decide whether to proceed with Helena's plan or surrender to Barrett's threats. My phone buzzed with a message from Helena. All pieces in position. Trust the process. I took a deep breath and made my choice. The boardroom was unusually full when I arrived. Besides the regular board members and executive team, I spotted Helena and Ramesh seated quietly in corner chairs. Barrett stood at the front, exuding confidence as he greeted board members with handshakes and easy laughter. When he saw me, he gestured to the computer station. Audrey will be walking us through the financial projections for our next funding round, he announced. Her analysis shows exceptional promise for growth. I connected my laptop and pulled up my presentation while Barrett continued his introduction, praising our company's remarkable turnaround and strong upward trajectory. Before I begin, I interrupted, I'd like to acknowledge some special guests who've joined us today. Barrett turned, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features as the boardroom door opened again. Lydia Moore, from the SEC, entered, accompanied by 2 colleagues. What's this about? The board chair asked, looking between me and the newcomers. These individuals from the Securities and Exchange Commission have some questions about our financial reporting practices, I explained, my voice steadier than I expected. Barrett's face flushed with anger. This is highly inappropriate. We haven't been notified of any regulatory review. Whatever. Misunderstanding. It's no misunderstanding, Lydia stated calmly. We're here following a formal investigation into financial misrepresentation across multiple companies, including this one. Barrett composed himself quickly. I assure you, our financial reporting follows all regulatory guidelines. If there are questions, our legal team should be present before any discussion proceeds. Actually, I said, turning to face the board, I believe I can address the central issue directly. I pressed a button on my laptop, and the display screen split into 2 identical-looking presentations. On the left are the actual financial figures for our company this quarter. On the right are the adjusted numbers Mr. Kingsley instructed me to present to you today. The room fell silent as board members leaned forward, comparing the dramatically different figures. This is absurd, Barrett sputtered. Audrey has clearly manipulated these documents too. To show the truth, Helena interjected. As a major investor, I commissioned an independent audit after noticing discrepancies in recent presentations. The results corroborated what Miss Winters discovered. And we have this, Lydia added, playing the recording of my conversation with Barrett, explicitly instructing me to falsify financial data. Barrett's face drained of color as his own voice filled the room. Show them 5% growth minimum. Use whatever methods necessary. What followed was the most extraordinary board meeting in company history. Barrett attempted to portray me as a disgruntled employee tampering with his legitimate work, but the evidence was overwhelming. The pattern of manipulation extended back through his previous positions. All companies that had initially reported remarkable turnarounds under his leadership, only to collapse months after his departure. This isn't just about one company or one CFO, Lydia explained to the stunned board. Mr. Kingsley's methods represent a pattern we're seeing across multiple industries. Short-term manipulations that create artificial value, attract investment, and leave devastation in their wake. The board placed Barrett on immediate administrative leave pending a complete investigation. Security escorted him from the building while he protested his innocence and threatened lawsuits against everyone involved. But the most profound moment came after Barrett's departure, when I stood alone before the board with the true financial figures displayed behind me. These numbers aren't what any of us hoped for, I acknowledged. Our product development has faced significant challenges, and our costs have exceeded projections. But these honest figures also show something important. Our core technology still has tremendous potential. We just need to address the actual problems, rather than hiding them. To my surprise, the board chair nodded. Integrity in financial reporting isn't just a legal requirement. It's the only way to make sound business decisions. Miss Winters, would you walk us through your actual assessment of our position and what you believe we should tell investors? For the next hour, I presented the unvarnished truth about our company, the good, the bad, and the potential pathways forward. When I finished, the room remained quiet for several moments. This won't be an easy road, the chair finally said. But it's the right one. The board thanks you for your courage, Miss Winters. 3 months later, our company held an emergency investor meeting. We presented our restructured business model, transparent reporting frameworks, and a realistic timeline for profitability. To everyone's surprise, our honesty didn't drive investors away. It attracted new ones who valued integrity alongside innovation. As for Barrett, the SEC investigation revealed manipulation extending across 5 companies. He now faced federal charges for securities fraud, with my testimony forming a central part of the case against him. The company created a new position for me, Chief Integrity Officer, with oversight of all financial reporting and compliance systems. My algorithmic pattern detection program became the foundation for a new approach to financial transparency that would eventually be adopted across our industry. Sometimes at night, I still think about Barrett's threats and that moment of decision in the conference room. He'd been right about one thing. Careers are fragile, but integrity, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. The greatest revenge wasn't watching Barrett's downfall. It was building something stronger from the ruins of his deception. Our company now stands as an industry model for ethical financial practices. The algorithms I developed to expose Barrett's fraud have evolved into tools that help other companies identify similar manipulations before they cause harm. Every quarter, when I present our actual numbers, good or bad, to the board and investors, I think about that pivotal moment when I chose truth over self-preservation. It wasn't the easy path, but it was the one that let me sleep at night, because some victories aren't measured in stock prices or promotions, but in systems that make corruption harder and integrity easier. And in the end, those are the only victories that truly last. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to hear more real experiences from the corporate world. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between your integrity and your career? What did you do? Your stories matter too, and I'd love to hear them. The hot coffee splashed across my face and chest, burning through my silk blouse to the skin beneath. The pain was instant, but I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. Everyone in the boardroom froze, as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The dripping of coffee onto the expensive conference table was the only sound. "You're nothing but a worthless assistant," Garrison bellowed, his face inches from mine as spittle flew from his lips. "How dare you contradict me in front of the board? You take notes. You bring coffee. You don't speak unless spoken to." 12 pairs of wide eyes watched from around the table. Some looked horrified, others embarrassed, but none spoke up. None moved to help me as I sat there, scalded and humiliated. I slowly reached for a napkin and dabbed at the brown liquid soaking into my clothes. 3 years of careful planning had prepared me for moments like this. I just hadn't expected such a public display of his true nature. I stood up. "Actually," I said, my voice calm despite the burning on my skin, "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." I reached for my phone, unlocked it, and held it up. "But before I continue, you should know that everything happening in this room has been recorded for the past 3 years. The color drained from Garrison's face as I turned to address the board. "Gentlemen, ladies, I believe it's time we had an honest conversation about the future of this company. Before I continue my story, I want to thank everyone who's been supporting this channel. If you're finding yourself glued to this story, please hit that like button and subscribe. It lets me know you want more content like this, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, back to that boardroom where my life was about to change forever. My name is Eleanor Merritt, though everyone at Horizon Technologies called me Ellie. I was 32 years old when the coffee incident happened, with degrees in business and computer science that no one at the company knew about. I'm naturally observant, patient to a fault, and have a memory that borders on photographic all qualities that made me exceptional at my job and terrible at letting go of grudges. I hadn't always planned to work as an executive assistant. My dream was to launch my own tech company focused on sustainable energy solutions. But fresh out of my undergraduate program with student loans looming, I needed steady income while I developed my ideas and saved startup capital. Horizon Technologies was a mid-sized firm specializing in energy management systems when I joined. The company had brilliant engineers but suffered from short-sighted leadership. I saw the potential immediately and thought I might learn something valuable before pursuing my own venture. Then I met Garrison Reed. As the CEO, Garrison had a reputation for being demanding. What people didn't say out loud was that he was also vindictive, manipulative, and took credit for others' work. He'd inherited the company from his father but told everyone he'd built it from nothing. I became his assistant through an internal promotion after his previous assistant quit without notice. Later, I learned she'd filed a harassment complaint that was buried by HR. "You're lucky to have this opportunity," the HR director told me with a plastic smile. "Many would kill for direct access to Mr. Reed." During my first week, Garrison called me into his office and made things clear. "I don't need you to think. I need you to do what I say, when I say it, how I say it. Can you handle that?" I nodded and played my part perfectly. The eager assistant, grateful for the opportunity, willing to learn. Inside, I was already calculating how to use this position to my advantage. For 3 years, I was the first to arrive and last to leave. I handled Garrison's schedule, his correspondence, his lunch orders, his gift selections for his wife and his girlfriends. I took notes in every meeting, organized his files, and became invisible in the way that only assistants can. Present, but unseen. Heard, but not listened to. What Garrison never realized was that I was listening to everything, learning everything. I understood the company's operations better than anyone because I saw all the moving parts. I knew which clients were unhappy, which employees were mistreated, which innovations were ignored because they didn't originate with Garrison. And I was planning. By day, I was the perfect assistant. By night, I was completing my master's degree in business administration and building connections with the very people Garrison had alienated. The first was Vivian Ortega, the former CFO. Garrison had fired her after she questioned some accounting practices that skirted ethical boundaries. I reached out to her 6 months after her departure, claiming I needed advice on my graduate thesis. Over coffee, I showed her my business plan. "You've identified gaps in the market that Horizon could fill but won't," she said, impressed. Why are you still working there? I'm gathering resources, I replied honestly, and there's still more I need to learn. Vivian leaned forward. What if you had funding to start now? That conversation led to many more. Vivian introduced me to investors who were interested in green energy solutions. With her financial expertise and my technical knowledge, we began building the foundation of a company that would compete directly with Horizon, but with a business model focused on sustainability and collaboration rather than short-term profits. Next came Rajan Patel, Horizon's brilliant lead engineer who quit after Garrison took credit for his revolutionary energy storage design. I found him teaching at the local university. I remember you, he said when I approached him after class. You were always kind, even when your boss was being impossible. I'm still his assistant, I admitted, but I'm working on something I think you'd find interesting. One by one, I connected with former Horizon employees who had left because of Garrison's toxic leadership. 6 key team members eventually joined what we called Project Phoenix, our company that would rise from the ashes of their broken careers at Horizon. We worked in secret for over a year. I continued performing my duties flawlessly at Horizon while building our competitor after hours. The double life was exhausting, but every time Garrison belittled me or took credit for my work, it fueled my determination. Then came a critical turning point. Garrison was invited to speak at the annual Energy Innovation Conference, but had a scheduling conflict with his son's graduation. Rather than miss the conference, he sent me to take notes, not as a participant, but essentially as his courier. Just get the materials and information, he instructed. I need to know what our competitors are planning. What he didn't know was that I had already arranged meetings with 3 of Horizon's biggest clients who would be attending the conference. Clients who had expressed frustration with Horizon's outdated approaches and lack of customer service. The first was Westbrook Industries, responsible for 22% of Horizon's annual revenue. Eleanor, said Diane Westbrook, the CEO, I was surprised to get your email. Does Garrison know you're meeting with me? Mr. Reed sent me to gather information, I said carefully. I'm gathering what I believe is most valuable. Over the next hour, I listened to her complaints about Horizon. Then I showed her what Phoenix Energy could offer instead. By the end of our meeting, she was interested. This is impressive work, she admitted, but leaving an established company for a startup is risky. That's why we're offering a phased transition with guaranteed benchmarks, I explained. And our team includes the very people who created the technology you already trust at Horizon. Similar conversations with Global NRG and TerraSmart followed. By the end of the conference, I had tentative commitments from clients representing nearly 2/3 of Horizon's business. When I returned, I gave Garrison exactly what he expected, a report on competitors' presentations and new products. I also recorded his dismissive response. This is useless, he scoffed, tossing my carefully prepared report aside. Next time I'll send someone who can actually understand what matters. I smiled and nodded, knowing that what really mattered was already in motion. The weeks that followed were intense. Vivian secured our final round of funding. Rajan finalized our product designs. Legal prepared the client contracts. We leased office space across town. Everything was ready. We just needed the right moment for me to make my exit from Horizon. Garrison unknowingly provided the perfect opportunity when he scheduled a board meeting to discuss the coming year's strategy. He asked me to prepare a presentation on client retention, a topic he knew little about but wanted to appear knowledgeable on. I spent days creating a comprehensive analysis showing alarming trends in client satisfaction and identifying specific improvements needed to prevent client loss. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was giving Horizon one last chance to address the very issues that would soon cost them most of their business. The morning of the board meeting, I dressed with particular care in a crisp white blouse and charcoal pencil skirt. I wore my grandmother's pearl earrings for courage. I carried a small recorder in my pocket, though the recording feature on my phone was also activated, redundancy being a lesson Horizon had taught me well. The meeting began with Garrison taking credit for my presentation, as expected. Then he opened the floor for questions. That's when Bernard Chen, the newest board member, asked the question that changed everything. These client satisfaction numbers are concerning. What specific steps are being taken to address their complaints? Before Garrison could answer with the talking points I'd prepared for him, I spoke up. If I may, Mr. Chen, I've included a detailed action plan on page 17 that addresses each area of concern. The room went silent. I had broken the cardinal rule. I had spoken without being asked directly. And worse, I had implied that I, not Garrison, had prepared the report. Garrison's face flushed crimson. Ellie is getting ahead of herself, he said with a tight smile. Those are the recommendations I've developed based on my conversations with key clients. Actually, I continued, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Those recommendations come from data I've gathered over the past year through client surveys and exit interviews. I turned to the page in question. You'll note that our 3 largest clients have all expressed similar concerns about outdated technology and poor response times. The plan I've outlined would address. That's when it happened. Garrison grabbed his coffee mug and threw the contents directly at me. The hot liquid splashed across my face and chest, soaking through my white blouse. You're nothing but a worthless assistant, he shouted. How dare you contradict me in front of the board? You take notes. You bring coffee. You don't speak unless spoken to. And there we were, back at the moment that would define everything that followed. I stood up, dabbed at my soaked blouse, and pulled out my phone. Actually, I said calmly, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. I turned to address the board members, whose expressions ranged from shock to embarrassment to curiosity. For 3 years, I've worked as Mr. Reed's assistant while completing my MBA and a second master's in sustainable energy at night. During that time, I've identified 17 critical flaws in Horizon's business model that Mr. Reed has consistently ignored or dismissed. Garrison laughed, though it sounded hollow. Sit down before you embarrass yourself further, Ellie. I ignored him and continued. Last month, when Mr. Reed sent me to the Energy Innovation Conference, not as a participant but to carry his materials, I met with representatives from Westbrook Industries, Global NRG, and TerraSmart. The board chairman, Harold Morris, leaned forward. Our 3 largest clients? Why would they meet with an assistant? Because they've been trying to communicate their needs to Horizon for years, without success, I explained. And they've all now agreed to switch their contracts to my new venture. Garrison's face contorted with rage. What are you talking about? What venture? I smiled. The venture that's backed by Vivian Ortega, the CFO you fired last year when she tried to warn you about accounting irregularities. The venture that employs Rajan Patel and the 5 other team members you drove away with your bullying and credit stealing. I reached into my bag and placed a business card in front of each board member. Simple, elegant, with the Phoenix Energy logo and my name. Eleanor Merritt, founder and CEO. I didn't steal anything from Horizon, I clarified. I simply created something better. And I'm here today not just to resign, but to offer this company a chance to become our subsidiary before your stock plummets tomorrow when our launch and the client transitions are announced publicly. Garrison lunged toward me, but Bernard Chen and another board member grabbed his arms. You think anyone would choose you over me? He spat, struggling against their grip. They already have, I replied evenly. 64% of your clients have signed with us, effective immediately. The tension in the room was palpable as the implications sank in. Harold Morris wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Why tell us this? He asked. Why not just leave and let us find out when it's too late? I looked around the table. Because unlike Mr. Reed, I believe in giving people chances. There are talented individuals at this company who deserve better leadership. My offer gives Horizon a path forward, instead of inevitable bankruptcy. I walked toward the door, then turned back to Garrison, who had collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. You have until tomorrow morning to accept my offer. After that, we become your biggest competitor with your client base already in our pocket. I gestured to my stained blouse. Oh, and I'll be sending you the cleaning bill for this. Consider it the first invoice of many. As I closed the door behind me, I heard the eruption of panicked voices. Through the glass, I saw their faces, white with shock at the realization that the worthless assistant they'd underestimated had just become the most powerful person in the room. 3 years of being invisible had made me invincible. But my story doesn't end with that dramatic exit. The real challenge was just beginning. As I walked through the office for the last time, employees stared at my coffee-stained blouse with confusion. My assistant, Zora, yes, I had secretly hired my own assistant 2 months earlier, was waiting at my desk with a change of clothes. "How did it go?" she whispered as she handed me a garment bag. "Exactly as planned," I replied. "Call the team. It's happening." Within an hour, I was standing in the new Phoenix Energy headquarters, addressing the core team that had been working in secret for months. Vivian, Rajan, and 19 others looked at me with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "It's done," I announced. "Horizon has until morning to accept our offer, but regardless of their decision, we launch tomorrow." Rajan clapped his hands together. "At last. No more pretending our company doesn't exist." Vivian was more practical. "What was the board's reaction? Do you think they'll take the deal?" I considered this as I changed into a fresh blouse in the adjoining room. They were stunned. Garrison was furious, but Harold Morris seemed open to discussion. He's a pragmatist. He'll do whatever saves the company and his reputation. The next 12 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Our PR team finalized press releases. Legal reviewed contracts one last time. IT prepared to take our website public. By midnight, we were ready for either outcome, Horizon's surrender, or our full-scale launch as their competitor. I barely slept that night, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. 3 years of planning, of swallowing my pride, of documenting every misstep and missed opportunity at Horizon. It was all culminating in this moment. At 7:30 the next morning, my phone rang. Harold Morris. "Eleanor," he said, his voice weary. "The board has been in emergency session all night." "And?" I kept my voice neutral. "We need more time to consider your proposal." I had anticipated this. The terms were clear, Mr. Morris. Deadline is 8 a.m. "Garrison has been removed as CEO, effective immediately," he said quickly. "We're prepared to discuss a merger of equals rather than becoming a subsidiary." This was interesting, but not enough. That wasn't the offer. "Please," he said, and I heard genuine desperation in his voice. "We have shareholders to consider, employees who had nothing to do with how you were treated." I let silence hang for a moment before responding. "I'll give you until noon, not as a courtesy to the board, but out of respect for the employees who deserve better than what Horizon has given them." I ended the call and turned to Vivian, who had been listening nearby. 4 more hours, I told her, but proceed with the announcements as planned. They need to understand we're not bluffing. At 9 a.m., our press release went out, announcing the formation of Phoenix Energy and our partnerships with major clients formerly aligned with Horizon. The industry news sites picked it up immediately. By 10 a.m., Horizon's stock had dropped 18%. At 11:30, Harold called again. "We accept your original terms," he said, defeated. "Horizon will become a subsidiary of Phoenix Energy." I allowed myself a small smile. "Have the paperwork ready by 2 p.m. I'll bring my team to your offices to sign." The return to Horizon that afternoon was nothing like my exit the day before. The reception area was hushed as I walked in with Vivian, our legal counsel, and 2 board members from our side. Employees watched from doorways and cubicles, whispering among themselves. In the same boardroom where Garrison had thrown coffee at me, Harold Morris and the remaining Horizon board members waited. Garrison was notably absent. "Where is Mr. Reed?" I asked as we took our seats. Harold cleared his throat. "He resigned this morning, with immediate effect." I nodded, unsurprised. "Then let's proceed." The signing took less than 30 minutes. Ownership of Horizon Technologies transferred to Phoenix Energy. The subsidiary would continue operations under new management, with a phased integration plan to minimize disruption. As we concluded, Harold asked to speak with me privately. The others filed out, leaving us alone in the boardroom. "I owe you an apology," he said once the door closed. "I saw how Garrison treated you and others. I did nothing." I studied him for a moment. "Why not?" He sighed heavily. "Complacency. Conflict avoidance. The quarterly numbers were good enough that I could justify not rocking the boat." "Those aren't reasons," I replied. "They're excuses." "Yes," he agreed. and now I've lost my company because of them. I considered him carefully. Harold was in his 60s, with decades of industry experience and connections that could still be valuable. You haven't lost anything yet, I told him. You've just acquired new leadership. Whether you still have a place here depends on what you do next. He looked surprised. You're not firing the entire board? I'm evaluating everyone based on merit and potential contribution, not past mistakes. I stood up. Send me a proposal for how you think you can add value to Phoenix Energy going forward. I'll review it like any other business proposal. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Eleanor, how did you do it? How did you work for him for 3 years without letting on what you were planning? I paused at the door. I learned something valuable from my time here, Mr. Morris. People see what they expect to see. Garrison expected to see a grateful, subservient assistant, so that's what I showed him. He never looked deeper because he never believed I could be more than what he defined me as. And now you own his company, Harold said with a hint of admiration. No, I corrected him. I built my own company. Horizon is just an acquisition. In the weeks that followed, we implemented our integration plan. I made a point of personally meeting with every Horizon employee to explain the changes and opportunities ahead. Many were understandably nervous, but others were visibly relieved to be free of Garrison's leadership. Is it true what they're saying? Asked one engineer during a department meeting. That you recorded everything while you were his assistant? Not everything, I clarified. Just the important parts. The room erupted in nervous laughter. The transition wasn't without challenges. 2 of Garrison's loyal executives resigned rather than work under my leadership. A few clients who hadn't been part of our initial outreach expressed concerns about the sudden change. But our preparation proved sufficient. We had contingency plans for every scenario. A month after the acquisition, I received an unexpected email from Garrison. The subject line read simply, "We should talk." Against Vivian's advice, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant downtown. I arrived early and watched him enter. He'd lost weight, and the arrogance in his walk was diminished. Eleanor, he greeted me, trying for his old authoritative tone but falling short. Thank you for meeting me. What can I do for you, Garrison? I asked once he was seated. He studied me for a moment. I underestimated you. Clearly. Yes, I agreed. You did. I want to understand something, he continued. Was it always your plan to take over Horizon? From the beginning? I considered the question carefully. No. Initially, I just wanted to learn the industry while developing my own ideas. But the more I saw how you operated, taking credit for others' work, ignoring valuable input, driving away talented people, the more I realized there was an opportunity to build something better. Using my clients, he said bitterly. Using relationships I built while you were too busy taking them for granted. I corrected. Every client who switched to Phoenix had tried to communicate their needs to you first. You didn't listen. He leaned forward. I want to make you an offer. This was unexpected. What kind of offer? I'm starting a new venture, he said. With my experience and your tactical approach, we could build something significant. I couldn't help but laugh. You're offering me a job after calling me worthless? His expression hardened. I'm offering you a partnership, equal stakes. I studied him, trying to understand his angle. Why would I consider working with you when I've already succeeded without you? Because I still have connections you don't, he replied, and resources you might find valuable. I took a sip of water, letting him wait for my response. Garrison, do you know why I recorded our interactions for 3 years? He frowned. Leverage, obviously. Protection, I corrected. I needed evidence of how you operated because I knew that someone like you would never accept defeat gracefully. You'd look for ways to retaliate, to reclaim what you lost, to prove you were still in control. His expression confirmed my suspicions. This meeting isn't about partnership, I continued. It's about you trying to find a way back in, to undermine what I've built. And that's never going to happen. I stood up. Enjoy your meal, it's been paid for. As I walked away, he called after me. You think you've won, but this isn't over, Eleanor. I turned back. Actually, It was over the moment you decided I was worthless. You just didn't know it yet. 6 months after the acquisition, Phoenix Energy was flourishing. We'd retained 92% of Horizon's valuable employees while creating a healthier work culture. Our client base had expanded beyond the energy sector into broader sustainability initiatives. Rajan's innovations were receiving industry recognition, and Vivian had streamlined our operations into a model of efficiency. I rarely thought about Garrison until Zora rushed into my office one afternoon. "You need to see this," she said, handing me her tablet. It was an industry news site announcing Garrison's new company, Reed Innovations, with a focus suspiciously similar to Phoenix Energy's core business. The article quoted him directly. "I'm returning to the industry with insights gained from watching others attempt to fill the void left by my departure from Horizon." I handed the tablet back to Zora. "Monitor this, but it's not a concern." "He's clearly targeting us," she pointed out. "Yes," I agreed. "And he'll fail because he still hasn't learned the right lesson." A week later, I received another email from Garrison. This one contained only a news release draft announcing that Reed Innovations had secured funding from a major investment group known for hostile takeovers. I forwarded it to Vivian with a brief note: "Activate Contingency Plan Delta." Within hours, our legal team had filed preemptive protective measures for our intellectual property. Our PR department reached out to key industry journalists to highlight our upcoming innovations. And I personally called each of our major clients to reinforce our partnerships. 2 days later, I held a company-wide meeting. "Some of you may have heard that Garrison Reed is attempting to re-enter our market space," I began. "I want to address this directly because transparency is one of our core values." The room was silent, everyone's attention focused intently. Garrison believes that business is about power and domination. His new venture is built on the same principles that led to Horizon's vulnerability: prioritizing ego over innovation, competition over collaboration, and profit over purpose. I clicked to the next slide, showing our growth metrics since the acquisition. Phoenix Energy exists because we believe there's a better way. We've proven that treating people with respect, listening to clients' needs, and focusing on sustainable solutions creates more value than the old model ever could. I looked around at the faces watching me, people who had chosen to be part of something new, something better. Garrison is looking backward, trying to recreate what he lost. We're looking forward, and that fundamental difference is why we'll continue to succeed while he struggles to gain traction. The applause that followed wasn't just supportive, it was determined. These people weren't just employees, they were co-creators of a vision. 3 weeks later, the investment group that had initially backed Garrison withdrew their support. Our industry contacts revealed that after conducting due diligence and speaking with former Horizon employees and clients, they'd developed concerns about Garrison's leadership style and business practices. The final chapter came unexpectedly. Harold Morris, who had indeed found a valuable role on our advisory board, requested a private meeting. "I have information you should know," he said when we met. "Garrison has been approaching Phoenix employees, trying to recruit them. He's focusing on people who worked at Horizon before, promising substantial signing bonuses." I nodded. "We're aware. No one has accepted." Harold looked surprised. "None?" "Not a single person," I confirmed. "But thank you for the warning." He hesitated. "There's more. He contacted me as well." Now I was interested. "And?" "He wanted inside information about your operations, your strategy," he offered. Harold looked embarrassed. "He offered significant compensation." "What did you tell him?" I asked, curious rather than concerned. Harold straightened in his chair. "I told him that I'd made enough mistakes with Horizon by enabling his behavior, and I wouldn't make the same mistake with Phoenix." I smiled. "Thank you for your loyalty, Harold." "It's not about loyalty," he replied. "It's about finally choosing to do the right thing." The next day, I received a hand-delivered envelope. Inside was a brief note from Garrison. "You win. I'm leaving the industry." I didn't respond. There was no need. This had never been about winning or losing for me. It had been about creating something valuable, while proving that success doesn't require sacrificing ethics or dignity. 1 year to the day after the coffee incident, I stood at a podium accepting an industry award for innovation. As I looked out at the audience, I saw faces of people who had been part of my journey: Vivian, Rajan, Zora, Harold, and dozens of others who had chosen to believe in a different kind of leadership. This award recognizes innovation. I began my speech. But the real innovation at Phoenix Energy isn't just in our technology, it's in our approach to business itself. We've proven that listening is more powerful than dictating, that collaboration creates more value than domination, and that sometimes the most impactful person in the room is the one nobody noticed. I paused, looking at the award in my hands. A year ago, someone told me I was nothing but a worthless assistant. Today, I lead a company that's redefining our industry. The difference between then and now isn't that I suddenly gained value, it's that I finally claimed the value I always had. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for me. It was for everyone who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. It was for everyone who knows they're capable of more than others believe they are. As for Garrison Reed, I heard he moved across the country and opened a small consulting firm. Sometimes I wonder if he ever truly understood what happened, how his biggest mistake wasn't throwing that coffee, but failing to see the potential in the people around him. I never sent him that cleaning bill, by the way. Some debts can't be calculated in dollars and cents, and some victories don't need to be rubbed in to be complete. If you've stayed with my story until now, thank you. Perhaps you've been underestimated too. Perhaps you're biding your time, building something in silence while others dismiss your potential. Remember, being underestimated is a gift if you know how to use it. People who don't see your value won't see you coming until it's too late. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And leave a comment about a time when someone underestimated you. I read every one of them. Because unlike some people, I understand that every voice matters, especially the ones others try to silence.